everyone! Last week I went to Daiso. Daiso is a dollar shop here in Japan, so you can buy everything for only 100 yen. So 100 yen is about 50 pesos, roughly 46 to 50 pesos, and it's $1. Everything here is very cheap, and this is actually my haven because you can buy anything and everything from office supplies to your toiletries to cleaning materials and of course art materials. So these are some of the items I picked. The first one is a calligraphy paper. My students in the high school where I teach use this calligraphy paper to practice calligraphy. I wanted to buy it because I also wanted to practice Japanese calligraphy with them. When I opened the pack, I found out that the paper was too thin for modern calligraphy or the calligraphy that I do. Maybe this paper is just for Japanese calligraphy because the paper is too thin. It feels like a tracing paper, and I think the ink might blot if I use this. I bought another type of paper. This is a much thicker paper than the calligraphy paper that I opened earlier, but it's also much smaller. It feels very fine and it also feels very sturdy. I think it is good for calligraphy or even watercolor paintings. If you look at the back of it, it says postcard, so I guess you can mail it out as a regular postcard. So here are the pens that I bought from Daiso. I found 6 different varieties of pens, and there are a lot more, but in the Daiso store that I went to, there are only 6 different varieties, so I picked them all up to check whether they are good brush pens for modern calligraphy. So let's check them all out. Which ones should I pick first? Okay, I'll pick this one first because this is more special than the others just because it has 2 different colors in one pen. If you can see their packaging, it already shows how thick the writing would be. So if you want a thinner one, you don't have to open it to check it out anymore. You just have to look at the packaging to see if it fits your needs. Japanese packaging are usually very easy to open. They have instructions, but I'm just too bad with opening packages, so I still struggled a little bit. If you can see here, it has a tag. It says made in Japan. Japan really takes pride in the items that they make, so usually when something is produced in Japan, they have a tag that says the item is made in Japan. So you can see there are 2 tips. The first one is a gray one and this one is a black one. This is a felt tip marker that is on the medium side when it comes to its softness, so you don't have to put a lot of pressure when you're going to achieve the thick downstrokes. Since this is a felt tip and the calligraphy paper is too thin, it's causing quite some blotting. But if you're going to use a cardstock or a different type of paper with thicker material, probably it would be good for those type of paper. The feel of the pen is smooth, but since the paper is quite rough, I had a difficult time with the thinner strokes. But so far, I think this is a good start because this is a great pen. You can achieve thin strokes and you can get those really thick strokes that are good for modern calligraphy. The next pen we're going to try is this one. It doesn't say anything that it's made in Japan. It doesn't have that mark, so it just says brush pen here, and since there's a lot of kanji characters in this packaging, I cannot really read it well. It just says pocket brush pen, flexi brush. I guess this is much softer, or it feels more like a brush than the first one, because the first one has a very felt like feel to it. I'm right, this is quite a thin and soft tip, and it feels like when you're doing calligraphy using a brush, but it doesn't have strands, so it's still a felt tip pen, but it's much thinner and softer. So as you can see, as I'm writing here, it gives us that brush streak feel. It has that streaky look to it, so it's very good for stylized calligraphy. But it's quite difficult to control because it's too soft, and because of its streaking. I don't recommend this for beginners, and I'm still quite a beginner when it comes to modern calligraphy, so I'm still struggling when it comes to using this pen. However, if you're going to do a Japanese inspired painting, you can use this calligraphy pen instead of a calligraphy brush, because it's still easier than the calligraphy brush. This one is another felt tip pen, I guess. I don't know how to read its name, but it says brush pen. It doesn't say made in Japan as well, so I guess it's made somewhere else. And out of all the pens, this is the longest one. It might be a problem when it comes to handling, because I like smaller pens. It's easier for me to handle because I have small hands. This one is also a felt tip pen, and it feels like the first one. It has a very similar feel to the first one, though it's a little bit smoother, I will say. And if you will compare the color, the deepness of the ink, I think this one is much better. It provides a deeper black tone to it, and it just feels nicer when you use it. It goes smoother, and you can make thicker downstrokes, and you can also still make some thin upstrokes. So this pen can provide more variety than the first two pens we've tried before. So I think so far this can be my favorite pen, because the feel to it is just very smooth. So I like this pen. The next one is a zebra pen. I think this is a Fude brush pen. It's maybe similar to the Pilot Touch pen that beginner calligraphers usually use. This one is quite different from the others because its packaging doesn't have that flap, so you have to tear it, and that's actually very heartbreaking for me because I just want something that has a flap so I can put it back in and then store it with the packaging. This pen, it has a good feel to it because it's not that long, it's not that big, it's not that heavy. It feels like a regular pen, and the tip is quite fine, and it's a hard tip, I guess, because you have to press really hard just to get those thick downstrokes, but it will be very easy to get the thin upstrokes because the tip is very fine. Even if you have a heavy hand, it doesn't cause the pen to produce thick strokes unless you intend to. So I think this pen can be very good for beginners, just like the Pilot Touch pen that I used when I was starting modern calligraphy back in the days, like maybe 2 years ago. So this is actually a very good pen for beginners, so I recommend this pen for beginners. Next one is another zebra pen. So this one is red, the other one was blue. This doesn't say made in Japan as well, so I don't know where it is made. And the packaging says that it might be quite thicker. than the first one. So let's see if it looks and feels the same. Packaging is also the same. You have to tear it and there's no flap, so I'm not happy with that. The body is very similar to the first one, besides it being all black, because the other one is a little bit grayish and it has some glitter marks, but this one is just pure black. So it has the same tip, just a little bit thicker. The tip it's also Fude brush pen. It is quite hard. You have to really give it a go when you want to achieve those thick marks or thick downstrokes. But again, I think this is very good for beginners. So since this is thicker, it can provide more variety. You can do a little bit more creative stuff with it. So I think this one is better than the first one, just because it can provide the same thin lines, but it can provide a thicker downstroke, so you can do a lot of things with it. So this one is much better than the other zebra brush pen. This is also good for beginners. The last pen I'm going to try is a pen that I love the most. I love this pen. I've loved this pen since I first used it. I was able to buy a pen like this back in Taiwan on my first international trip way back in 2015. So I found this in one quaint library cafe in Taiwan. And it's one of the pens that really got me into calligraphy, because at first when I bought it, I thought it was just a regular marker, kind of a Sharpie that has a thinner tip. But when I used it, I realized that it was a brush pen. So I tried using it for calligraphy. That's how I started learning about modern calligraphy. So I incorporated it in my journaling as well. So as you can see, it still has the classic tip. It's very thin and it's also quite hard, so it's very good for those who still struggle with controlling your thin upstrokes and your downstrokes. So I recommend this for everyone who's just getting into calligraphy. So this is the best pen out of all the pens that I've tried, but when I bought it back in Taiwan before, I think it was a little bit pricier. I don't know why. Maybe it's because the shop was not really a bookstore, it's not really a mainstream or a discount store like Daiso, but it was a cafe. That's why it's quite expensive. But here it's just 100 yen, 108 yen if you're going to add the tax. So it's just $1.08. Now that we tried all 6 pens, I can now tell you the 2 best Daiso brush pens, in my opinion. The first one is this long felt tip brush pen that I tried earlier. I love it because of its smooth feel, and it provides really deep dark tones, and you can do a lot of freestyle calligraphy using it. And then of course, my favorite, the Pilot Touch pen.